Hi, I'm Janet Bowman. I'm with the Nature Conservancy in Tallahassee, and I'm a lawyer, and my job is really to lobby for Florida Forever land acquisition funding. And it's great to be here because I'm a native Southwest Floridian. I was born in Sarasota and went to New College, and it was interesting to hear Jim talk about epoxy. That brought back a memory of interning for Sarasota County when I was in college. So it's great to be in Southwest Florida. It has a special place in my heart. The title of my presentation that's in the agenda is Forever, Florida Forever. And I'd say that the sort of stark news today is that Florida Forever is in trouble for some economic reasons, but really more importantly for some political reasons. And it was really interesting to me to sort of hear Jim's chronology of some of the historic successes in Southwest Florida. And I think what they really show is that you have to take the long view, and if you meet resistance at one path, you have to find a different way to achieve the same result. And that's what we're trying to do today. But one shouldn't give up on the notion of state land acquisition funding. And I think what's really important at the local level to remember is, there's some factors that have affected the ability of the legislature and the cabinet to really have the history of understanding, what a great program Florida Forever has been, what it's accomplished. Because many, certainly in the legislature with term limits, you have people, many of whom aren't necessarily from Florida, have not been in their communities very long, and really have not experienced some of the benefits or really spoken to constituents about these projects. So I think one of the things I would like you all to take away from this, those of you who are local sort of community-based activists, is to, after the election, go talk to your new representative, your new state senator about land acquisition in this region and why it's important and what it's accomplished. So if that's one thing you take away from my talk, that's what I'd like you to take away. Okay, this is a map from the Florida Natural Areas Inventory that shows Florida Forever, state, federal, and locally managed lands. And if you see, there's a fair percentage of Florida that is in some sort of conservation. The brown is federal lands, the red local, and state green. And if you look at Southwest Florida, I think one of the great success stories is a lot of the conservation has been done at the local level. And certainly the local governments here have had very successful land acquisition programs that have had a lot of local support. Just to give you some figures, state conservation lands, they're over 4 million acres in fee protection, 581,000 less in fee. Federal conservation lands, another 4 million in fee, 5,000 or so less in fee. And local conservation lands, 472,000 acres in fee, 7,520 less in fee. So what do you take away from these figures? I mean, I take away, wow, Florida's been very successful in acquiring and protecting conservation lands. However, there are those in Tallahassee that their takeaway is, wow, look at all the land off the tax roll. Look at all the land that we can't afford to manage. We own too much state and federal land, and we need to divest some of it. In Charlotte, in the Charlotte Harbor area, there's a large Charlotte Harbor Florida Forever project that's a combination of several projects, and it's been, I'd say, one of the very successful projects that's almost complete. It's in the lingo of Division of State Lands, it's substantially complete. However, there are pieces that remain to be acquired. Just to give you a little history of the particular Charlotte Harbor Estuary project, and I'm just going to use that as an example to illustrate sort of what's going on with Florida Forever in general. The project area was originally 45,200 acres, of which 38,000 has been acquired at a cost of over $35 million. There are 6,874 acres remaining to be acquired at a projected value of $9 million. And the figure is whatever the latest the Division of State Lands used, so that $9 million figure may or may not be accurate given current land values. But as you see, the project is 3/4 complete, and with a little bit of investment, the project would be complete. What's great about the Charlotte Harbor project is it includes certainly estuary protection, tidal marsh, mangrove swamp, and in the adjoining pine flatwoods. The Myakka Estuary project protects northern Charlotte Harbor, conserving flatwoods, scrub, and salt marsh. So it's a great project in that there are a number of habitats. It's a consolidation of what were three sort of standalone projects. And then here's a graph. I don't really expect you to be able to see it very well, but it shows essential parcels remaining in green. And if you look on the upper left-hand side, there's some sort of on the north, and then there's some lots left on the south east corner. And then here's a picture sort of moving a little bit south of the Florida Forever project areas. And if you look over to the east, there's a ranch parcel that's also kind of in the region. And here's the essential parcels remaining on the sort of southern part of the Charlotte Harbor project, estuary project. Okay. One of the things I wanted to point out to you all is the Charlotte Harbor Estuary is one of very few projects that's on the current Florida Forever work plan that was recently approved by the Acquisition and Resource Council and was supposed to go to the governor and cabinet next week. That's been delayed. And I would note that sort of in the last year, the progress of the state in moving forward on land acquisition has really come to almost a complete halt. Despite, though there's not a lot of money remaining, but there's about $666 million remaining to be spent. Last year, the legislature appropriated $8 million to be used for less than fee or partnership opportunities. And certainly in this region, there have been a lot of partnership acquisitions where local governments or water management districts or others are bringing money to the table in addition to the state. So again, one of the things I think from a locally standpoint you all ought to be aware of and perhaps become advocates of is your project is on the priority list and in line to be funded. And decision makers in Tallahassee need to know that you expect that money, should be spent on your project. As I mentioned before, the appropriation last year was $8 million and directed to be used for less than fee acquisition or partnerships. This is because at the state level, there's a general perception that the state cannot afford land management funding right now. And I'd say during my tenure lobbying the legislature, even in good economic times, the state has really underfunded land management. And but as Jim pointed out, it's important to get the land, get it protected, and to work out management strategies after the fact. One way that we have certainly been stressing to get around land management issues are conservation easements on working lands with ranchers and others who are going to remain on the land and continue to manage, yet the land provides important habitat. Just on funding trends, as you see, the money has pretty much trickled to a couple million here, a couple million there, from a peak in 2006 of $600 million, and that was the year Babcock Ranch was purchased. So what we're doing at the Nature Conservancy is we're looking for ways of leveraging funding, putting together deals that involve funding both from federal programs, the Farm Bill programs, Wetland Reserve Program, Endangered Species Grant Program, and sort of the newest potential pot of money on the table is the Restore Act, Gulf of Mexico restoration, looking at ways of potentially using civil penalties for land protection. And I know the estuary programs are looking at proposing projects that are important to them that are in their work plan. And certainly that's an important new source of funding for land acquisition and stewardship. So just to give an example of how we've put together these deals, in May we closed on a 1,228 acre tract for panther habitat called American Prime that's on the Caloosahatchee River in Glades County. And this piece was on the brink of foreclosure. It was before the judge, close to the final judgment of foreclosure. And we were able to pull together money from private funding, from Section 6 U.S. Fish and Wildlife funding, and from the Natural Resource Conservation Service. Then a landowner rancher purchased the fee. So we had two different conservation easements over this particular parcel of land, yet the land is going to continue to be managed by this benevolent rancher who is really excited about his role in protecting panther habitat. There's sort of the breakdown. For the federal money, that had to go through the Florida legislature. There had to be a budget amendment to approve expenditure of that. And as a lobbyist, it was really interesting to me that I sort of had to engage in negative lobbying where raising attention to this could have resulted in it not passing. And so that's kind of the environment in Tallahassee that we're dealing with, is where land acquisition is not favored right now. And again, that's where you all can play an important role in educating your new legislators and certainly state officials on why land acquisition and stewardship is important to the region and to the economy, certainly in Southwest Florida. To get around sort of management costs, again, I mentioned conservation easements, there's possibility of multiple easement holders, and then the federal government is starting to develop management endowments for federal properties. For example, Department of Defense lands. We sometimes partner with them to buy buffer land, base buffer lands. So they're bringing to those deals some conservation endowments. So that's kind of a new idea for land trusts, particularly to think about setting up endowments for the long-term management of land that's acquired. Okay. Great time. Good. All right.
Thank you very much. I'm from Collier County, and we have Conservation Collier, which is the land acquisition program. One of the barriers for us in partnering with Florida Forever was the desire of the state to acquire sole title. I know there was some discussions before about that, and I'm wondering if there's been any movement in that regard.
Well, I know that's been an issue for us in working with the military on some of the base buffering acquisitions. Some of those services are interested in holding joint title, and it's something that requires a legislative change, but I think would be certainly doable. So I think that's a very good point, and as money is sort of reduced, it's more important, if the local government or, the partner has a greater stake in the acquisition, it makes sense perhaps for them to hold title as well, particularly if they're going to assume management responsibilities.
Thank you.
Successor program to Florida Forever on the referendum. I believe it's in 2014.
Sure. There's a current ballot initiative effort, the Florida Water and Land Legacy Campaign. And the idea is to set aside a third of dock stamp revenue, an existing, tax funding source that currently funds Florida Forever today. But over time, that money has been diverted for other purposes. Some of it goes to, for example, transportation, goes to DOT. So the idea is to set aside a third of dock stamp revenues for conservation, and unlike Florida Forever, it could be used for restoration and land management. And so that sort of diminishes the argument that money wouldn't be available for land management. It could also be used for restoration. It could be used for Everglades restoration and other restoration kind of work. So it's very broad, but I think that the general point is that a third of dock stamp revenues would be used for conservation, water and resource conservation. Right. There's a website for that, and the ballot language was just submitted to the Secretary of State last week. And once it's approved, they're going to be soliciting, well, they have been soliciting for volunteers to collect petitions. So that's another way you all can become engaged.
Does the amendment provide that the money can be used for easements as well as
yes.
Okay.
It can be used for easements. It can be used to purchase working lands. So that's a strategy that's included in the menu.
So any other questions? Well, thank you so much, Janet. We really appreciate it.